Hey sports fans, Janine Charron here for Tiger Talk Tuesday. So this week we have NHL coach Claude Julien and former player of the NHL who we are so excited to have. So thank you very much for being here. For those of you who don't know Claude, he's got a very impressive bio, which I'm going to relay some of his amazing accomplishments. So he's a Canadian professional ice hockey coach and former player. He most recently served as the head coach of the Montreal Canadians of the NHL. Prior to leaving Boston in 2017, he was the longest tenured head coach in the NHL. He previously served as head coach of the New Jersey Devils, as well as in the AHL with the Hamilton Bulldogs. In 2011, he coached the Bruins to the Stanley Cup Finals against the Vancouver Canucks, winning 7 games, guiding Boston to their 6th franchise Stanley Cup history. In 2013, he brought the Bruins to another Stanley Cup Finals. However, they lost the series to the Chicago Blackhawks in 6 games. Julien used to be an NHL defenseman for the Quebec Nordiques in the 84, 85, 85, 86 season. And I have posted his bio. I could go on and read all his accomplishments from his coaching career to his work with Team Canada. He's an amazing coach and an amazing athlete, and I'm so excited to have you here. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Janine. Thanks for having me.
And okay, and we've spoken about this off camera, that the purpose of these series is to highlight, the mental and emotional ups and downs that athletes go to, and support those athletes that are suffering in silence to know that they're not alone. So maybe why don't we start out? Let's talk about 1 second. I found a great little pic of here when he played for the Nordiques, but let's talk about as a younger athlete. Where was your headspace? Were you always someone who just was confident and had that winner's headspace, or?
I did. I had confidence, and again, something that I've always been humble. I was never one of those people that got overconfident, because I wanted to feel like anybody could approach me, and I wanted to, kind of understand at the same time that when you have that opportunity in life, you're also lucky to be doing what you're doing. And, it's almost like I wanted to share that versus, showing overconfidence and having that arrogance that you don't like seeing in people. So I was one of those guys that really loved sharing my experiences, and that's what I did through my career.
Yeah, and I mean, a lengthy career as well. So what was that like when you jumped? So you had your playing career as a player. When you left the NHL, was there a transition period for you where you were or did you just jump right into coaching?
Well, no. When I left as a player, I kind of took a step back and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I think at the time, I went back to school, took some night classes, was trying to consider what was my next step. And that's a big transition, and that's a big, I guess, a big stress on a lot of players at times, especially in my case where I was in the minors. I wasn't making the kind of money that players are today, where they can retire and move on. So that was a bit of a stressful time for me, but I was fortunate enough to get approached back into the world of hockey, which is all I knew from the time I left home at the age of 16 years old, and it was kind of ingrained in me. So that lifestyle suited me well. I don't know if
I think most of us athletes feel that way, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a comfort level for me.
Yeah.
So that to say that I don't know how challenging it would have been had I not had the hockey part come back into my life, and those are challenges for a lot of players, and also as coaches, because I'm at that stage right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the school, because some of the other athletes that I've spoken to have mentioned that about either going back to school, because you spent, I think, 6 years in the OHL is what I...
In the QHL, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, and was that a concern? Like, I don't have schooling to fall back on, and then luckily you get back to coaching. But for young athletes out there, would you recommend, I know you want hockey to be your be-all, end-all, and we'd all love to have that happen, but do you recommend that they focus on something else on the side?
Well, it's like anything else. You tell athletes to play different sports for the mindset, for development. I think it's the same thing when it comes to a stage in your life where everybody would love to play in the NHL. Everybody wants to be a pro athlete. So at the same time, not everybody gets that opportunity. So it's always good to have something else, and you can. you don't have to focus just on one thing. And I think education is great, and even more so today, Janine. I think back in my day, college hockey wasn't quite as developed as it is today, and so same thing with the with the QHL, the OHL, Western Hockey League. They really offer a really nice package of education to the players, and I think it's important that today, more than anything else, for that transition period, that if you've got an opportunity, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Now and then as a player, your coaching career is phenomenal. You've got a lot of history, and when I was reading your bio, that tells me that you have amazing leadership skills, your ability to take a team and find out the right chemistry for your players. What was that from a headspace? Like when I printed off a picture. Like when you look at this guy, when you first, sort of work. I've got a picture here of him working with the Montreal Canadians, but. What would you tell that guy years ago when you first started out? Was he ready for it? How did you take it on, and where was your headspace at?
Well, it's like anything else. I think it's important that you evolve with the times, that you evolve with the years, that you gain experience, that you learn as you go along as well. Just because you become a coach, let's say at the NHL level, doesn't mean that you know everything now. And I think what's been important, and I've said that for years and years, if you don't evolve with the game will push you out. And that means the different players that I had 20 years ago when I started in the NHL and the players that are coming up now, there's different approaches. And you have to be able to understand that the world evolves, the individual evolves. Quick example, in my day, I wouldn't have never knocked at my coach's door to see why I wasn't playing. I would just tell myself, and that's the way it was back in the day, I just got to be better.
Yep.
Nowadays, they want to know. Well, I can't be looking back at my day say, well, hey, I didn't get a chance to go see my coach. They shouldn't. You need to evolve. You need to have an open door. And I think at the same time, not just hockey-wise, but on the personal side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's interesting because I love that you're very humble, and the willingness, great athletes and the ones that I do believe the greats that last a long time, they're always pushing, they're looking to how they can evolve and how they can be better, which is interesting because I've had some conversations with some parents out there about their young athletes not wanting to put as much time into the practice and the off ice, where that's where the magic happens. When it's game time, you're just executing, right? All the prep work happens. So what would you say to some athletes who, talent's not going to get you there alone?
No, and it's proven it every year, even at the highest level. If you don't have the work ethic, if you don't have the passion, if you don't put the time in, you're not going to get the success, because talent is something that you're blessed with.
Yep.
You can improve talent by working at it, but if you just rely on it, there's no way you're going to succeed. So it's got to be a little bit more than that. And I think number one is, as parents, you got to make sure that your child is enjoying going to the rink or to the field, whatever sports they're playing. They got to enjoy it first. Once they enjoy it, that's when they want to put more time into it. That's when the passion comes in. That's when you see them turning the corner. They're on their own. They're practicing either their shots or kicking a ball, and that's when you know that you've done a good job with your child.
Well, and what would be, as a coach, you've had great success with teams, and again, what's kind of your philosophy? How do you make sure your players are in a peak headspace, as well as bringing your best self to the situation? I guess two parts of that. How do you mentally prepare behind closed doors for yourself, and how do you get your players to consistently show up?
Well, if you want them to consistently show up, I think you have to be ready to show up, and that's where preparation is important for coaches. Players need to feel that the coach has everything under control. His pregame, his pregame is ready. His video is ready. He knows everything about the other team that his players need to know, and then you share that with them, and all of a sudden, like you said, you get that trust factor. But at the same time, it's about the players feeling comfortable, knowing that everything is ready for them. So all they got to do is go out there and perform. When you've done that, then it's normal to expect that your players are going to give the most of themselves game in, game out. Although we know that's not always realistic, but the effort has to be there. Whether it's a good effort or maybe not as good an effort as you'd like, it's got to be there. And I think for the most part, athletes are proud today. They work hard, their conditioning, their eating habits and everything else, that when it comes to playing a game and being ready to play, mentally, I would say they're there almost all the time.
Yeah, and you do have you could tell you have great self-leadership qualities, otherwise you wouldn't have achieved and been where you're at today. Now, we talked about some of those transition moments where life wasn't as predictable, or there were some transitions through different NHL teams that you've coached. How did you approach that? And, I really want athletes to know that are watching this. Claude is a human being, just like every single one of us. We've talked about trials and tribulations off camera, but maybe you can share what would be, maybe there's a timeline or a few timelines, because life is never a straight line, but that you've gone through something that was challenging mentally and emotionally, and you were maybe in a little bit of a rut. What was that feeling like, and how did you spring back?
Well, it's funny to say that, Janine, because just a few years ago when I was let go by Montreal, even as I got let go, I could feel myself kind of not being myself. And we'd just gone through COVID. We'd gone through a lot of things. And, again, playing without fans, or even showing up to the rink every day, having to go through the COVID test in the parking lot before we could even go into the rink. And there was a lot of changes in our lives, and shortened seasons. You remember the bubble for playoffs and all that stuff. So there was a lot of changes. And when I was let go, I kind of knew I wasn't quite myself. And I had told my wife at the time that I needed to take a year off before I'd even consider getting back into hockey. And, I ended up last year, as much as
yeah, it's hard to take time off. But tell them where you ended up.
Well, my goal was to take the time off, and then I got a call from the Hockey Canada, and they'd asked me if I would do the Spengler Cup and possibly the Olympics if the NHL wasn't going to go there.
Kind of hard to say no, eh?
It was kind of hard to say no, and at the same time, I also ended up coaching at the World Championships in May. So last May, a year ago today. So that kind of
once an athlete, always an athlete. Hard to hang that hat up. Yeah,
it was hard to say no, and I didn't. And I think in hindsight, when I look back, I know that I wasn't 100% at my job. And this year, all I've done was I've done some consulting work. I've done a little bit of pro scouting as well, and I feel like I'm back to myself. So obviously it's not just the players that go through it, the coaches do. I've spoken to other coaches in the NHL that have told me the same thing. So it's not something that's unique. It's something that's very much out there.
And when you are not feeling like yourself, are you someone, some people journal. I've talked to some of the other players, they like to meditate. Do you have anything that you do for yourself, or are you just more, you like to reflect and be by the water? Or
Well, that's probably it. I love being, by the water, reflecting a little bit, like you said, and just kind of going back in your thoughts and what's happened in your career and everything else. And once you do that, it's amazing how the next step is, well, what do I do next? You're reminiscing, you're seeing what's accomplished, and then you're saying, do I want to accomplish more? And that's where I'm at right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm at that stage where, and I've publicly said, under the right situation, I would probably go back.
Okay.
And because, I don't want to get into a situation where I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to take that step back and then go back to where I was. I think it's important for me to be ready and to do the best job possible. So that's the challenges today of having to grind through some of the challenges that you're facing at times.
Well, it's also, you see it with players when they're kind of getting ready to possibly retire or not, or hang up the skates. It's that internal struggle with, am I ready, or is it time? And that's why you see some people retire and then they come back here and then they kind of finally hang it up. So that's interesting. So you feel like if it's the right concoction, maybe Claude Julien will say yes to another coaching career.
Could be, but it's like you said, we're so used to I said earlier, from 16 years old, I left home to play hockey, then became a coach. So it's hard to all of a sudden just cut that cord and all of a sudden say, well, okay, now I'm going to do something totally different. We're creatures of habits,
Yeah.
and I've gotten used to this habit of being at the rink 7 days a
Yeah.
week, for 8 to 10 months a year, and then even on those supposedly vacation time, you're still doing a little bit of what you've been doing in preparation. So it's really, really hard to just step away from it and think that everything's okay.
So so you're scouting and stuff. How do you stay in the game now? And is that kind of just doing a little bit more consulting, and that's kind of your attachment now, or?
Well, that's what it was last year, and I thought it was great for me. And as I mentioned, it really helped me get back to where I wanted to be mentally and also passionately. And I did some consulting with the team in Switzerland, and helping the coaching staff, and even worked with players, management, and shared my experience, I guess. And also did some pro scouting with the St. Louis Blues, and so I would go to pro games and watch other teams and write reports on players. And so if they were talking trades or want to know something about certain players, I had my opinion on them. So that was good for me. It kept me in the game, yet it didn't put me in a position behind the bench that brought a lot more stress and a lot more demands.
I love it. Well, you've heard it from him personally. Claude Julien, I thank you so much for being here. You can tell, he mentioned about being humble as a young athlete, and I do believe that's a superpower for a lot of people, especially when you've had the status and the teams that you've played with. So I can feel it even being around you. Your energy is very calm, and so I appreciate you being here. And any final last words for young athletes, or that you would like to share with the viewers on this topic of life after sports, or those pockets of transition, before we go?
Well, I think, when you talked about, developing as you go along and adapting to the different lifestyle. And I think, today I would caution parents about how hard they push their kids, because it is, the mental health issues are out there. The stress is already out there. I think if anything, they really need encouragement. And if they get the encouragement and that they're loving what they're doing, you let them enjoy it, eventually things will fall into place. But I think that's so important that today we support more than we push, to the point of stressing people out. And as we've often mentioned, social media is out there. There's a lot of things going on in life other than sports. So I think today, as parents, we want to be there and be on top of things. And if anything, you want to be able to have your kids come to you if they have anything going on. And I've done it as a coach with players, and I'm sure parents can do it with their own kids.
And you'd see that, that's amazing that you said that, because you do, probably the players that you see coming through your door, they picked up a stick very young, and they did it on their own natural interest and ability. It wasn't, we see that a lot of parents pushing, and not to put anyone down. I know we have high hopes for our children, but the ones that really want it, they just show up and they do the work themselves. There's no having to push them, right?
No, exactly. They come in and they're passionate.
Yeah.
As you say, the key word is passionate. And when they're passionate, they just go and do it on their own. And that's what you like to see. And you like to see that from kids. You like to see that from your own players at the professional level. But that's when they're enjoying what they're doing.
Oh, I love it. Well, you heard it here straight from Claude Julien for Tiger Talk Tuesday, Episode 7, Transitioning from Life After Sports. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Janine.